the moment my daughter slid the glass toward me across the dinner table. I knew something was wrong. Not because of the drink. Not because of the silence around the table. But because I had spent 75 years learning how to read people. And in that moment, my daughter was trying very hard not to look at me. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pushed the glass closer. Her smile looked forced. And when she thought nobody was watching, she slipped something into my drink. A small vial. A single drop. Clear. Invisible. Deadly. She thought I hadn't seen it. But I had. So instead of shouting, instead of accusing her in front of everyone, I stayed quiet. And when the right moment came, I switched the glasses. Minutes later, her husband lifted the poisoned drink to his lips. My daughter's face turned white. And that's when I realized something heartbreaking. The child I raised with love was willing to kill me for money. My name is Emily Carter. I am 75 years old. And this is the story of the night my own daughter tried to poison me. And how the truth destroyed everything she thought she would gain. Welcome to my YouTube channel Moral Ecos, where silence speaks. A life built on sacrifice. My life was never glamorous. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I lived honestly. I worked hard, loved deeply, and believed that family was the most important thing in the world. I grew up in a quiet town where neighbors still greeted each other by name, and people left their doors unlocked at night. My father worked at a factory. My mother was a nurse. They taught me 3 simple values. Work hard. Be kind. Take care of your family. Those values stayed with me my entire life. When I was 23 years old, I met the man who would become my husband. His name was Robert Carter. Robert worked as a mechanic. His hands were always stained with oil, but his heart was the purest I had ever known. He wasn't wealthy, but he was honest, and that was enough for me. We married 2 years later and built a simple life together. Then one day our daughter Claire was born, and suddenly our world revolved around her. The day everything changed. Claire was 8 years old when tragedy struck. Robert died suddenly from a heart attack while at work. One moment he was fixing an engine. The next moment he was gone. I remember standing in the hospital hallway, feeling like the air had been ripped from my lungs. Claire kept asking one question over and over again. "Mom, when is Dad coming home?" I didn't know how to answer. But I knew one thing. I couldn't fall apart. Because Claire needed me. So I worked harder than I ever had before. I became a school teacher during the day and tutored students at night. Sometimes I graded papers until midnight. Sometimes I skipped meals to save money. But I never complained. Every sacrifice I made was for my daughter. And for many years, I believed she appreciated it. A loving daughter. Claire was a bright and curious child. She loved books. She loved art. And she always dreamed big. I still remember the day she graduated high school. She ran into my arms and said something that filled my heart with pride. "Mom, everything I am is because of you." At that moment, I believed every struggle had been worth it. Claire went to college and studied business. She worked hard and graduated with excellent grades. For a while, life seemed perfect. But everything began to change the year she met Daniel Whitmore, the man who changed my daughter. The first time I met Daniel, something about him unsettled me. He was charming, confident, well-dressed, but behind his polite smile was something cold. He shook my hand firmly and said, "Mrs. Carter, Claire talks about you all the time." But the way he looked at me felt strange. Like he was studying me, evaluating me, almost as if I were some kind of investment. Still, Claire seemed happy. So I stayed silent. Sometimes love makes us ignore the warnings our instincts try to give us. Claire married Daniel 2 years later. And slowly she began to change. The questions about money. After the wedding, Claire started asking questions she had never asked before. Questions about my finances. How much is your house worth now, Mom? Have you updated your will? Did Dad leave life insurance? At first I thought she was simply worried about my future. But over time the questions became more frequent. And Daniel always listened carefully whenever money was mentioned. They also began living far beyond their means. Luxury vacations, expensive furniture, a large house that seemed impossible on their salaries. Something didn't feel right. But whenever I asked about it, Claire laughed. Relax, Mom, Daniel is great with money. Maybe he was. Or maybe he was great at something else. The dinner invitation. Then one evening Claire called unexpectedly. Mom, Daniel and I are hosting a family dinner this weekend. You should come. Her cheerful tone surprised me. Claire rarely invited me anywhere these days. Of course, I said. It would be nice to see you both. Great, she replied quickly. Daniel will cook. That surprised me even more. Daniel had never cooked before. But I tried not to overthink it. Maybe they were finally making an effort to reconnect with me. At my age, you learn to cherish the moments when family reaches out. The dinner, Saturday evening, arrived. Their house was beautifully decorated. Candles flickered on the dining table. Soft music played in the background. Everything looked perfect. But something in the air felt tense. Like a storm waiting just beyond the horizon. Claire greeted me with a hug. But it felt different. Short. Uncomfortable. Daniel shook my hand and smiled. Emily, it's good to see you. Dinner smelled wonderful. Roasted chicken. Fresh vegetables. Warm bread. Then Claire walked to the bar counter and began preparing drinks. Wine for herself. Beer for Daniel. And a special cocktail for me. Your favorite, she said. But it wasn't my favorite. I had never even tasted that drink before. That was the moment I began paying closer attention. The moment I saw everything. Claire stood with her back slightly turned. Her hand moved quickly toward her pocket. She pulled out a tiny vial. Then she leaned over my glass. One drop. Just one. Then she stirred it gently. She thought nobody noticed. But I was watching her reflection in the glass cabinet behind the bar. My heart froze. For a moment I felt like the world had stopped moving. My own daughter. Poisoning my drink. But instead of reacting, I stayed calm. Because 75 years of life teaches you something important. Panic never reveals the truth. Patience does. The silent decision. Dinner began. Claire kept glancing at my drink. Waiting. Watching. Daniel talked about work, investments and business opportunities. But I barely heard him. My mind was racing. Why would she do this? What had I done wrong? Then suddenly an opportunity appeared. Daniel stood up to grab something from the kitchen. As he returned to the table, I casually reached forward. Let me move these glasses, I said. And in one quiet motion, I switched them. My poisoned drink now sat in front of Daniel. No one said a word. But Claire saw it. Her eyes widened in horror. The sip. A few minutes passed. Then Daniel lifted the glass. Claire's voice trembled. Daniel, maybe you shouldn't drink that. He laughed. Why not? And before she could stop him, he took a large sip. The color drained from Claire's face. I watched silently as Daniel took another sip. And another. Then suddenly, he frowned. Strange taste, he muttered. Within minutes his face turned pale. Sweat appeared on his forehead. His hand gripped the table. Something's wrong. Then he collapsed. The truth comes out. Clea screamed. An ambulance was called immediately. Doctors later confirmed something shocking. Daniel had ingested a powerful sedative mixed with a toxic compound. Not enough to kill instantly, but enough to cause serious harm. Police began investigating, and under pressure, Clea broke down. The truth was worse than I imagined. Daniel had convinced her that if I died suddenly, it would appear natural. At my age, a heart attack wouldn't raise suspicion. She would inherit everything. My house, my savings, my investments, nearly $2 million. Their plan was simple. Poison the drink. Wait, and call it a tragic accident. But greed makes people careless. And that night they underestimated one thing. A mother's instincts. Consequences. Daniel survived. Barely. But the evidence against them was overwhelming. Messages. Search history. The poison itself. Both were arrested. And the daughter I raised, the child I sacrificed my life for, was sent to prison. The final visit. Months later I visited Clea. She cried the moment she saw me. "I'm sorry, Mom, I don't know what I was thinking." I looked at her quietly. "I gave you everything," I said softly. "And you tried to take the one thing I had left. My life." She had no answer. And that was the last time I saw her. A new beginning. I sold my house. Donated most of my money to charity. Scholarships. Children in need. Families struggling the way I once struggled. Because if my own daughter couldn't appreciate the life she was given, maybe someone else would. Moral of the story. Greed can poison even the strongest relationships. Money can blind people to the love that raised them. But truth always finds its way into the light. And sometimes, the greatest strength isn't revenge. It's surviving betrayal with dignity and letting justice speak for itself.
If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every story here leaves behind a lesson.